I didn't realize they had that 2, 3 little verses there. All right, we're back on, everyone. We're going to be continuing with the Joshua portion, and right before Sister Marissa leads us off with 6, I'm going to be reading a couple of extra verses this portion gives us for the Joshua portion of this Pasach Torah portion for today. So it's Joshua chapter 3, 5-7. So just follow with me to Joshua 3, 5-7, verses 5-7 here. Okay, we're back on, everyone. We're going to be continuing with the Joshua portion. All right, yeah, I had to get that off of the background there, at background noise. All right, okay, so let's get back on the shared screen to the scriptures here. Joshua 3, 5-7. Okay, so this is when they're coming to the Jordan River. You know what? Actually, I'll read all 7 verses. That's not that long. Okay. All right, here we go. Joshua chapter 3. And Joshua rose up early in the morning, departed from Sattim. They came as far as Jordan and lodged there before they crossed over. The officers instructed the people for their passage, and it came to pass after 3 days, the scribes went through the camp, and they charged the people, saying, when you shall see the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah our Elohim, and our priests and Levites bearing it, you shall depart from your places, and you shall go after it. But let there be a distance between you and it, and you shall stand as much as 2,000 cubits. Do not draw near to it, that you may know the way which you are to go, for you have not gone the way before. And Joshua said to the people, set apart yourselves against tomorrow, for tomorrow Yahuwah will do wonders among you. And Joshua said to the priests, take up the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah and go before the people. And the priests took up the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah and went before the people. Okay, verse 7. And Yahuwah encourages Joshua, and Yahuwah said to Joshua, this day do I begin to exalt you before all the children of Yasharal, that they may know that as I was with Moshe, so will I also be with you. And now charge the priests that bear the ark of the covenant, saying, as soon as you shall enter on a part of the water of Jordan, then you shall stand in the Jordan. Okay, so that's pretty much the end of that little portion there. Let's see if there's anything else important here. Actually, you know what? Well, let's see here. There's only 17 verses. We'll just finish the chapter here. I didn't even realize how short this chapter actually was. Okay, so I think I stopped at what, verse 8 there, or 8, verse 9. And Yahusha said to the children of Yasharal, come here and hearken to the word of Yahuwah our Elohim. That's interesting, the way that's worded. Hereby you shall know that the living Elohim among you will utterly destroy from before our face the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, the Amorite, the Girgashite, the Jebusite. Behold, the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah of all the earth. It's an interesting phrase there that you don't see often. Another thing to make mention is the Targums of the Torah use that phrase a lot, Yahuwah of all the earth. So very interesting. Passes over the Jordan. Choose for yourselves 12 men of the sons of Yasharal, one of each tribe, and it shall come to pass when the feet of the priests that bear the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah, the whole earth, rest in the water of Jordan. The water of Jordan shall fail, and the water coming down from above shall stop. So it's almost like you could say like what it would be like, almost like similar to the Red Sea crossing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The water of Jordan are divided. The people removed their tents to cross over the Jordan, the priests before the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah before the people. And when the priests that bore the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah entered upon the Jordan, and the feet of the priests that bore the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah were dipped into part of the water of the Jordan, Now Jordan overflowed all its banks about the time of harvest or wheat harvest. So this would be, a beep. Then the waters that came down from above stopped. There stood one solid heap very as far as the region of Karathi-arim, and the lower part came down to the Sea of Arabah, the Salt Sea, till it completely failed, and the people stood opposite Jericho. And the priest that bore the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah stood on dry land in the midst of the Jordan. All the children of Yasharal went through on dry land until all the people had completely gone over Jordan. Okay. And now I'm going to let Sister Marissa, whenever you are ready, Joshua chapter 5.
Okay. Joshua chapter 5?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And it came to be when all the sovereigns of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan westward, and all the sovereigns of the Canaanites who were by the sea, heard that Yahuwah had dried up the waters of the Jordan from before the children of Israel, until we had passed over, that their heart melted. And there was no spirit in them any longer because of the children of Israel. At that time, Yahuwah said to Yehoshua, make knives of flint for yourselves and circumcise the son of Israel again the second time. So Joshua made knives of flint for himself and circumcised the son of Israel at the hill of foreskins. And this is why Yehoshua circumcised them. All the people who came out of Mizraim, who were males, all the men of battle, had died in the wilderness on the way after they had come out of Mizraim. For all the people who came out had been circumcised, but all the people who were born in the wilderness on the way as they came out of Mizraim had not been circumcised. For the children of Israel walked 40 years in the wilderness till all the nation, the men of battle who came out of Mizraim, were consumed because they did not obey the voice of Yahuwah, to whom Yahuwah swore not to show them the land which Yahuwah had sworn to their fathers, that he would give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. And Joshua circumcised their sons, whom he raised up in their place, for they were uncircumcised, because they had not been circumcised on the way. And it came to be when they had completed circumcising all the nation, that they stayed in their places in the camp, so they were healed. And Yehoshua and Yahweh said to Yehoshua, today I have rolled away the reproach of Mizraim from you. So the name of the place is called Gilgal to this day. And the children of Israel camped in Gilgal and performed the Pasach on the 14th day of the month at the evening on the desert plains of Jericho. And they ate of the stored grain of the land on the morrow after the Pasach, unleavened bread and roasted grain on this same day. And the manna ceased on the day after they had eaten the stored grain of the land. And the children of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate the food of the land of Canaan that year. And it came to be when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted his eyes and looked and saw a man standing opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, are you for us or for our adversaries? And he said, no, for I have now come as captain of the host of Yahuwah. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and did obeisance. How do you say that? Obeisance. And he said to him, what is my master saying to his servant? And the captain of the host of Yahuwah said to Joshua, take your sandal off your foot, for the place where you stand is Kodesh. And Yeshua did so. I have a question.
Go ahead, sis.
Okay, hold on, I'm trying to find it. Number 15. Okay, so the people that came out of Mizraim were circumcised, but the ones after the golden calf were not? Is that what it's saying?
Well, it's actually talking about the basically the generation of Yahusha and all of them, like the people that Yahusha's leading into the promised land right now are not the same generation of the Exodus. So that's basically what it's saying. They would have been their little ones. You know how they complained to Yahuwah and said, "Oh, we're for the 40 years in the wilderness." Those people that died in 40 years in the wilderness were the same people that said about their children of that next generation, no, they'll die if we, they were the same people that wanted to stay in Egypt. They were like, our little ones will die if we go up and fight these giants and all that. So the context of this historically is that this is a newer generation that would have not been circumcised yet, that were not the same generation that Moses was. If that makes any sense. It's like it's the next generation that would have been like toddlers for the 40 years in the wilderness. So there's no way they would have been circumcised because remember, the 8th day of circumcision hasn't fully been instituted yet. Technically, like they're not, like even with Abraham's circumcision, he wasn't circumcised on the 8th day. He was circumcised, when he was 100 and something. So like sometimes Yahuwah would give allowances to, especially, for certain situations where they weren't able to be circumcised until they were of a certain age. Even though later on Yahuwah gives the 8 days circumcision, it seems like this generation wasn't able to be circumcised on the 8th day when they were born for some reason. There seems to be some reason why they weren't able to, possibly because a lot of their parents died in, the 40 years in the wilderness, their parents died. So they really didn't have.
I wouldn't think that other people will continue, like, they have these traditions that we've had for many, many years. These traditions are passed on from one parent to another child. So I'm a little confused about why the scriptures say that they weren't circumcised because the past generation didn't tell them. I mean, generation after generation is aware of all this stuff. So would that be an accurate statement to say?
What was the statement?
That these generations, they didn't know about circumcision because they weren't taught it. I mean, maybe
it's also the fact that Brother Joshua, I think he's watching off of YouTube. He's mentioning to me a verse up here from the chapter you just read. Let me see what he's saying here. He's talking about the fighting men came out of Egypt weren't circumcised. Yeah, for some reason they weren't circumcised. I'm wondering if there's a reason for that. It's not that they forgot, but more or less Yahuwah was seeing the stiff-neckedness of their parents' generation's heart, and Yahuwah wanted their hearts to be circumcised before their flesh. And it could have been that was the reason. We see that in other places in Jeremiah, even one verse I think Sister Sadia shared on Facebook the other day shows that in prophecy, Yahuwah is going to visit the spiritual uncircumcision of the circumcised. And so it seems like maybe Yahuwah stopped this generation from being circumcised right away because their parents' wickedness was so bad that Yahuwah was more concerned in this instance of their spiritual circumcision than their physical circumcision, if that makes any sense. So that's what I would do to explain this, because I know some people will say, see, they weren't circumcised. It doesn't seem that important to the Father. But you'll see later on in Scripture, it's mandatory in the Torah for the 8th day to be circumcised on, and not before the 8th day. So it seems like this is like an exception to the rule, because Yahuwah was so concerned about that 40 years. Most likely these people that are being circumcised here are the children, I would think, of the prior generation that was killed in the 40 years in the wilderness, that were forced to walk in the wilderness for 40 years, that were not allowed to go into the promised land. So to me, historically, it would make sense that Yahuwah sees this. He's like, okay, so their fathers and their ancestors didn't want to hearken to me. What point is it to physically circumcise their children until I test their children to see if they will be spiritually circumcised before they're physically circumcised? So that's kind of my opinion on the matter. From what I see, the whole counsel of Scripture showing is that Yahuwah is more concerned with our circumcised heart before our flesh, us men. Right. So, we need to show Yahuwah, or sometimes even prove to Yahuwah by faith, that we are spiritually circumcised before he's even going to give us the seal of the old covenant, the circumcision of the flesh. Because what's the point? A lot of times, especially when, especially with Gentile converts, you see that a lot. Like Timothy, for example, in the Brit Hot Shot, he didn't get circumcised until he was a grown man because his dad was a Greek. He most likely was raised partially Gentile and, was probably not raised, or probably was not circumcised on the 8th day, possibly because there was a unequally yokedness problem with his parents. And when he became a follower of Yahusha, and was discipled by Paul, he felt convicted at a certain point to get circumcised. So there is definitely, it seems like it's part of Yahuwah's plan sometimes to wait a little bit until the person can be circumcised, along with their heart being circumcised. Not saying that that's always the case, because obviously the commandment in the Torah is on the 8th day. But at the same time, though, that commandment of on the 8th day was always, of his people to be circumcised on the 8th day. Because when he's talking to Abraham, he says, anyone that converts to me, you have him and all his males circumcised. And you see that in Exodus 12. That's the context. It's not that, Gentiles automatically should be circumcised on the 8th day. The context is that you're actually having someone proselytize or convert to the worship of Yahuwah, and then let all of their male children be circumcised on the 8th day. That's the context there. So there's also a differentiation between Yahuwah's people and Gentiles that are grafted in. And, when they don't, half of the time they're not getting grafted in until they're adult. So they wouldn't be able to be circumcised on the 8th day. So that would be my, answer to that question. It's a very loaded type of question, because you see in certain instances, especially with Yahuwah's own people, they're being circumcised automatically on the 8th day every time. This instance seems like there were some extenuated circumstances that we maybe might not know about in Joshua here in chapter 5, for the reason why they're not being circumcised right away on the 8th day. It's very possible. Like I said, it could be a spiritual uncircumcision that could have caused that from the prior generations. That could have been possible. I don't know, something to think about. It could have something to do with it. But
I think that's probably true, because we see that sort of feeling from Yahuwah all throughout many things. He got to the point where he said to them, I detest your sacrifices. I don't want any part of your Shabbats, your what you call it, moons, your crescent moons, new moons, because their hearts were not in the right place. Even David, when he was repenting, said, I would bring a sacrifice if that's what you wanted. But he knew that what he wanted was a rightful heart, a humble heart, right? Right. So we see kind of that going through time with Yahuwah.
Yeah. That was a really good question by Sister Marissa, and really it's very confusing when you see that, and then but the majority of other scriptures is that everyone's to be circumcised on the 8th day. All of Yasharal, all of Israel, all believers are to be circumcised on the 8th day. So their children are supposed to be circumcised on the 8th day. So that's a very good question. Also, I wanted to touch on what she read here before I let her continue and go into the next chapter. I wanted to look at one verse that's a little bit more specific on who this commander is in the Septuagint. And most people might just look past, it's probably Michael or someone. No. This is the Messiah here, pre-incarnate. This is Yahusha. And the reason I say this, it doesn't just say commander in the Septuagint, it says chief commander. Now, if you understand the Greek word there for chief, when referring to this Malach, this messenger, is the same word, if I'm not mistaken, Paul uses when it says Yahusha should be preeminent. So this is talking about someone that is above every messenger, above every angel. So let me see if I can find that in chapter 5 of Joshua, where it talks about the chief. Let me see here. The second day, 7 priests. I think it might have been. Where is it? Am I in the right chapter? Oh, that's why I'm in chapter 6 for some reason. So somehow I got to chapter 6. Here we go. Yeah, so here we go. It says, I am now come, the chief captain of the army of Yahuwah. And Yahusha fell on his face upon the earth and said to him, Master, what do you command your servant? And then we see that he says, and the captain of Yahuwah's army said to Yahusha, loosen your shoe off your foot, for the place where you now stand is set apart. Which, by the way, is almost a direct, same word for word quote from Exodus 3:14 to 15, where the person in the flaming fire of that bush says to Moses, take off your sandals, for where you stand is set apart ground. So to me, that's a clear indication who this messenger is. This is Yahusha pre-incarnate, before he took on flesh. Yahusha multiple times, for those that are unaware of this, in the Tanakh, Yahusha will not be called Yahusha before he took on flesh. He will be called the messenger of Yahuwah multiple times in the Old Testament. So this captain, this chief captain of the angelic army is Yahusha himself. And we see this in Revelations, I think, what is it, Mom? 19 verse 13, where it says, the armies of Yahuwah follow him. Okay, so this is it's pretty obvious who this is talking about here. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out. I don't want to take too much time away from Sister Marissa reading. Go ahead, sis, whenever you're
Brother Elias is gonna read it.
Okay, sure.
Elias Elias.
Hey, stop.
No, you said you were.
Study. You could read it.
Okay, brother.
All right.
Okay, you read half. Can I read half? Okay, so there's 27 verses.
You already tried to review?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Are you ready, brother?
Yes.
Okay. And Jericho was shut up tight because of the presence of the sons of Israel. None going out and none coming in. And Yahuwah said to Yehoshua, see, I have given Jericho and its sovereign mighty brave men into your hand. And you shall go around the city, all the men of battle going around the city once. Do this for 6 days. And let 7 Kohanim bear 7 rams horns before the ark. And on the 7th day, go around the city 7 times while the Kohanim blow the horns.
Yes.
And it shall be when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the horn, that all the people shout with a great shout. And the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall go up, every man straight before him. And Yahshua, son of Nun, called the Kohanim and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 Kohanim bear 7 rams horns before the ark of Yahuwah. And he said to the people, pass over and go around the city, and let him who is armed pass over before the ark of Yahuwah. And it came to be, when Yahshua had spoken to the people, that the 7 Kohanim bearing the 7 rams horns before Yahuwah passed over and blew the horns, and the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah went after them. And the armed men went before the Kohanim, who blew the horns, and then the rear guard came after the ark, going on and blowing the horns. But Joshua had commanded the people, saying, do not shout or cause your voice to be heard, nor let any word come out of your mouth until the day I say to you, shout. Then you shall shout. And the ark of Yahuwah went around the city, going around once. And they came into the camp and stayed in the camp. And Yahushua rose early in the morning, and the Kohanim took up the ark of Yahuwah. And 7 Kohanim bearing 7 ram's horns before the ark of Yahuwah were walking, going on, and they blew the horns, and the armed men went before them. But the rear guard came after the ark of Yahuwah, going on and blowing the horns. And the second day they went around the city once and returned to the camp. Thus they did this 6 days. And it came to be on the 7th day that they rose early about the dawning of the day and went around the city 7 times in this way. Only on that day they went around the city 7 times. And it came to be at the 7th time when the Kohanim blew the horns that Joshua said to the people, shout, for Yahuwah has given you the city. And the city shall be put under the ban, and the city shall be put under the ban. It and all that is in it belongs to Yahuwah. Only Rahab the whore is to live, she and all who are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. Hallelujah. And you, by all means, guard yourselves from that which is under the ban, lest you come under the ban when you take of that which is under the ban, and make the camp of Israel a curse, and shall trouble it. But all the silver and gold and vessels of bronze and iron are Kodesh to Yahuwah. They go into the treasury of Yahuwah. And the people shouted when the Kohanim blew the horns. And it came to be, when the people heard the sound of the horn, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat. And the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they captured the city. And they put under the ban all that was in the city, both man and woman, young and old, and ox and sheep and donkey, with the edge of the sword. And to the 2 men who had spied out the land, Yahushua said, go into the house of the woman, the whore, and from there bring out the woman and all that she has, as you swore to her. And the young men, the spies, went in and brought out Rahab and her father and her mother and her brothers and all that she had. So they brought out all her relatives and put them outside the camp of Israel. And they burned the city and all that was in it with fire. Wow. Only the silver and gold and the vessels of bronze and iron they put into the treasury of the house of Yahuwah. However, Yahushua kept alive Rahab the whore and her father's household and all that she had. And she dwelt in the midst of Israel to this day, because she hid the messengers whom Yahushua sent to spy out Jericho. And Yahushua warned them at that time, saying, cursed is the man before Yahuwah who rises up and builds the city, Jericho. He lays his foundation with his firstborn, and with his youngest he puts up its gate. And Yahushua was with Yahushua, and Yahuwah was with Yahushua, and a report about him was in all the land. Now it says that the city of Damascus is supposed to be completely destroyed and no one is supposed to rebuild it. But we have a city of Damascus today. So how is it that in the Bible it says the city of Damascus is to be destroyed and no one is to rebuild it, but yet still we have a city of Damascus?
It's a future prophecy. It's a future end time prophecy.
Now, what about Jericho? We have a Jericho today.
Yeah, it says, though, it doesn't say it won't ever be rebuilt. It actually says, cursed is he who rebuilds it in this verse you just read from the Septuagint. It says, and Yahushua adjured them on that day before Yahuwah, saying, cursed the man who shall build that city. So he's not saying it will never be rebuilt. He's saying that whoever does it, they're hurting themselves. Basically.
So that's generation after generation, because obviously generations built Jericho, rebuilt it.
Yeah, Jericho historically, I've heard, says other researchers find out that Jericho, reason Yahuwah hated the city of Jericho so bad was they worshiped the moon goddess. So they would have been worshiping Diana, Semiramis. So I guess the reason behind this command here saying that, anyone that even attempts to build it is going to be cursed. Yahuwah, one of the reasons he hated that city, didn't want it being rebuilt, was because of the of who they worship there. It is known as, the city of the moon, supposedly. And so it's saying here, though, that is not saying that it won't ever be rebuilt like the Damascus prophecy you talked about. It's actually saying whoever does rebuild it, that man will be cursed. He shall lay the foundation of it in his firstborn. He shall set up the gates of it in his youngest son. And so did Hosanna of Bethel. He laid the foundation in Abiram, his firstborn, and set up the gates of it in his youngest surviving son. So it's the Septuagint version of verse 26 is actually saying someone did attempt to rebuild it. Even in that day, someone was trying to rebuild it, but he's basically saying, if you rebuild it, you're cursed. You're spiritually cursed. You're going to be cursed if you do it. So this guy Hosanna of Bethel is cursed because he rebuilt it. So yeah,
brother, I have another question. Why do you think the Bible keeps repeating that Rahab was a whore, like over and over?
I think it's to show the reason it probably reiterates is because it's showing the mercy that the Father had on her pretty much. And it's showing even in the Brit Hadashah, it references her as by her faith, she became of Israel. And it's showing the crafty then concept that Yahuwah can even take a harlot and graft her in because of her faith. In my opinion, that's why I think he keeps reiterating that she was a harlot. That it's kind of like showing that Yahuwah can take us in our dirtiest mud and clean us up. That we're not too far from the Father, from him grafting us in. Which Rahab was a ethnic Gentile. Also, to add to that, she was a harlot. It wasn't just that she was a harlot; she was an ethnic Gentile, inhabitant of Jericho, and was not a Shemite, and she was grafted in. And by her faith, if I'm not mistaken, the book of Hebrews talks about her faith, compares her faith even to the faith of the other natural-born patriarchs like Enoch and all of them, compares her faith to even of them. So, yeah, she was definitely an important person, and she's definitely one for us to show people that think that grafting in is not possible. I know there's certain camps out there that say you have to be ethnic Israel to be saved, which in my is actually preaching a false basora to say that. There's many non-ethnic people, ethnic Gentiles that were grafted in. Ruth, ethnic Gentile. Job, ethnic Gentile. Many people of faith that were not born Israelites. So anyway, but that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. But but yeah, that's a good question. I think the reiteration of her being a harlot, though, like I said, is the idea that he could take even a harlot, a prostitute, a whore, and clean her up and make her a new creation. I think that's probably the purpose of it being reiterated the way it is to remind people that he can take us at our lowest point and save us. So, so I think Rahab was definitely an interesting foreshadowing to the new covenant and all that into Romans 11, in my opinion. Rahab is a good foreshadowing. But I also found it very interesting when you were reading, obviously there's a major difference with the Masoretic Bibles we have today. They like to translate certain words for ram's horn, which I would respectfully disagree. It's not ram's horn there. But anyway, I do find it interesting that this instrument, I believe it was the silver trumpet or the cornet they were actually blowing, to make the walls of Jericho fall down. I always think that's cool that Yahuwah is giving an instrument that he gave them to praise him and to start Sabbaths and new moons and feasts with, that same instrument, possibly the silver trumpet, or another instrument sometimes mentioned in scripture, the cornet, which the cornet would be like a curved French horn, that it's used to, for even instances like this, to go into war. I found it interesting. It mentions the priests blowing the trumpets, which this is like a callback to Numbers chapter 10, where he institutes the silver trumpets in Numbers 10, and for certain instances, he wants the priests to blow them for certain specific purposes. So I just thought that was interesting, cool. But yeah, definitely the story of Rahab is definitely a good grafting in to show people the concept of being grafted in. Definitely a good story of that. And it shows that really she had a lot of faith. She barely knew these guys like Joshua and them. She's like, yeah, I trust you that you're going to keep your word and that you're going to save me alive. So very cool. But just to add to the difference with the Damascus prophecy, it literally says, I think it's in Isaiah, in the book of Isaiah. It's in one of the later prophets that it literally says it will not be rebuilt. So that has not happened yet. A lot of people misunderstand and thought it already happened. No, that's a future end time prophecy from Isaiah that has not happened yet. And personally, I think will not happen until we get closer and closer to Messiah's return. That's just my opinion. But just wanted to explain the difference there. But yeah, very, very good stuff. Very tube stuff there. So, all right, let's see here. What do we have next? I think we already did the Joshua. Sister Marissa did the Joshua portions. I did Exodus. So I think we're left with my mom and Brother Dennis. So let me go back to my notes here. I think Brother Dennis will be starting the Brit Hadashah portion. So let me end this. I wonder why it seems like so small. There we go. So when we get back on the recording, guys, Brother Dennis will be starting us off with John 19. So please stay tuned, everyone, to our 15th Abib Pesach Torah portion reading. We'll be back. Thank you for those that have been listening so far. I hope you're enjoying this.